I was born Gregory Calvin Wilson. I got my mother's maiden name as my first name, and I got my father's brother's first name as my middle name. I know not why. And of course, I got Wilson's surname. Born in Washington, D.C., March 9th, 1957, about 10 o'clock at night, Saturday night. So you can call me Kwame Sule.
And where did Sule come from?
When I got to junior high school.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Sule being your first name now.
Sule being a name that I took on
Okay,
when I was 12 years old.
okay.
I went to my neighborhood school, kindergarten and first grade. Went across town, across the tracks
In D.C.?
in D.C. to Cleveland Park to school from 2nd through 6th grade. Then my daddy said he needs to come back and be reacculturated. So I went back to my neighborhood school for junior high, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, where my mother's oldest brother's second wife was a math teacher there. And she also was co-sponsor for the African Heritage Club at Rabot Junior High School. And so I got in that. And as part of the African Heritage Club was the Oya African Dancers and Drummers, the folkloric ensemble. And so everybody in the group has to get an African name. So they gave me the book, little brown book, Names from Africa, and I took it home, and I sat at the kitchen table, and I looked through the book excitedly, and Sule, West Africa, adventurous. I said, yeah, I want to be that. But that had to be on approval. So I had to take it to the group, and they had to say, and of course, my aunt, she busted out laughing when I said I want to be adventurous, because I wanted to be a paleontologist before that. And, but she said, sure, we'll call you Sule. So I started using that. I used that when I was in the group during junior high school and high school. And then I stopped using it because nobody knew about that group. But then I'm back in DC my second year, the summer after my second year of college. And I'm at Park Road working with Bahá'í, doing a drum making workshop. He said, you have the name, you should use the name. So I decided to use that name, but not throw away the rest. So that's why it's like Sule Greg C. Wilson.
So, I don't want to forget this part. You said you were going to school in the more, what would you call it? It was the black community?
Yeah, in Manor Park, which is 2 blocks outside of Tacoma, D.C.
Okay, but then you went to Cleveland
Park.
Park.
Yes.
School. Why?
Our parents took advantage of the moment in history and got my big brother out of Paul Junior High School and got him into Capitol Page School. Second black.
What does that mean?
Okay.
For someone who doesn't know.
Yeah. The congressmen, senators, and the Supreme Court all get students to run errands for them. And they're pages, just like in medieval times. And my brother was one of those pages. He was the first one to wear long pants, because up to that time, all the pages still wore knickers. And so he got on the cover of the Washington Post with the one in knickers and the one in pants. And so he was running around in the Supreme Court, so he was doing that. Then our sister Wendy, I guess she was, instead of going to Paul, because Rabot was just being built, she went to Jefferson Junior High, way in Southwest, but that was an arts-based school, like a magnet. And they got me in John Eaton Elementary School, where I went to school with Walter Mondale's son, with Congressman Goodell's son, with Anand Modak and, Idam Tutspono.
Who's that?
This is people from Indonesia, people from India.
Ambassadors.
Yes, ambassadors' children, right, and curators' kids, and all this stuff. And wound up going to school with, he was a year ahead of me, the NFL, guys in charge of NFL, Goodell. I was in class with his little brother, but Roger was a year ahead of us, Timmy. So those are the people I was going to school with.
So this was what year, roughly?
2nd grade through 6th grade. So I started at Rabot in '69, so this was
So
65.
this is after the Civil Rights Bill has been passed,
60, yes, 65, 66,
Right,
67,
and-
68, yeah.
and these schools are now, I mean, what was it like? Because DC was a very segregated town.
Yes, it was.
So can you talk about that? What was it like going to these other schools?
Well, there were about 5 of us coming from our side of town that our parents came together and had this guy drive us in a cab across town every day for the first year or so. And then I took the buses.
How did you feel? Did you have any fears, apprehension?
No.
No, you were excited.
It was just the reality.
Okay.
I just accepted it, you know? My mother told me later that they said, this, talking about me, this kid is too smart, you gotta get him out of here, you know? And my corollary for that in relation to going to John Eaton is this guy, some student at the school's father went to Poland, I think. And so he came back and did a slideshow for the kids on everything he saw in the Warsaw Zoo. And I was helping him out naming all the animals and doing all this other stuff. And so he actually, that parent got me a book of animal stories and gave it to me. And for some strange reason, I resented that. I have yet to read that book, but I still have it with the inscription and everything. So the idea of going across was not that big a deal to me. Did I experience racism? Yeah. I only remember one real instance, actually a couple. I was on the school safety patrol, you know, which these were boys designated to stand and help the younger kids cross the street safely. And this is for the older, so 5th and 6th graders. So I was in line to become captain next. Well, guess what? They skipped over me and put David Chang in that position instead of me. I was like, what the? Come on, come on. And then, another instance, I'm standing on my corner, right at 33rd place and Porter, or Lowell, doesn't matter. And it was snow day. So I was just standing there, so I had a snowball, just messing with it because I was bored. This white woman stops her car, gets out the car, says, "Put down that snowball." Just broke off little pieces of it. Because I was not going to obey, but I was not going to, acquiesce a little.
She got back in and...
She got back in, and then I got called into the principal's office because she went home and called the school. And the principal, who was the granddaughter of George Pickett, if you know the Battle of Gettysburg, Pickett's Charge, Confederate general, she was his granddaughter, called me in and gave me a talking to.
Do you remember what did she...
No, because I was just...
You were too young, yeah.
No, I didn't care. I was just thinking about the fact that she was the because her name was on the placard, and I hadn't really had to deal with her before. And I'm looking at her name, knowing who she is related to, and that's what I took in. Whatever she had to say, I knew I was not wrong, so so I really didn't care.
So, and there were more experiences like this or not? I mean, those are the two you recall.
Those are the two I recall. I mean, I was not friends with many people. And
You mean outside of your community?
in John Eaton.
Okay, in the school.
Yeah, in the school. The people that befriended me.
I'm sorry,
yes.
is that the school where there are only 5 African Americans? You were saying?
Yes. Yeah, we
Is
got.
that-
Yeah.
I want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But like I said, we had Chinese,
Yes.
Indian, Indonesian, Alexis Genoux.
French.
Yes. And Jeannie O'Donnell, which I'm still in touch with.
Who's that?
Let me share this with you. Jeannie O'Donnell, I mean, 2 things stand out with her. We had our school picture, and like 5th grade picture, and everybody's lined up. And Jeannie was so sick. And I had never seen a person's skin be that waxen. So that was amazing to me. You know, it's like, wow. I think I still have that picture. But one thing about Jeannie O'Donnell, and which has helped launch me to be the person that I am today, is that she came to school one day and said, my ancestor is going to be on Disney this Sunday. Yeah, they made a movie about my ancestor, and they're going to be on The Wonderful World of Disney. And it was Jeannie O'Donnell, her name, and so it was The Fighting Prince of Donegal. You know, and I was like, and I had been sitting at my grandparents' feet and at the kitchen table, hearing story upon story upon story about our people. And I was like, how does she get to be, and we don't have anything on TV?
What was the thing she had on?
It was, they made,
What was
it was a Disney movie on the Fighting Prince of Donegal, an Irishman.
I see. But nothing about your family.
Yes, and I said, the stories that I've heard, the amazing things that I know about, it just made me realize how it was not there. You know, my Ethel Waters came on Daniel Boone one time. And my parents made me watch the show because of who she had been. Sweet Mama Stringbean in the 20s and 30s, and this great actress and singer and stuff like that. I said, this is a rare thing you need to watch. Or when Sammy Davis Jr. was on the Wild Wild West. And and so these little glimpses, my parents made sure that we got that. But I'm still mad, not mad at Jeannie O'Donnell,
No, but yeah.
but just understanding that
The erasure.
the erasure, the ignorance, the ignoring,
Yeah.
the willful ignoring of stuff.
And so, growing up in DC, you were still in a segregated community.
Okay, when we moved into the house, it's the only house I remember. I was born, when I was born, the family still lived on Gresham Place, just off of Howard. Just by Howard, just off of Georgia Avenue. And that was the house I was brought home to. But the only house I remember is 214 Rittenhouse Street. And when we were there, Mr. Brodsky lived next door. Old white guy, white hair, big guy, wire rim glasses, silver. Very nice guy, had a real cool workshop in his basement. And he had old pieces of boiler, you know, iron, like a front of a boiler.
Oh, yes.
And he used those as buttresses from erosion in his yard. And one of the things that he used to hold up this half cylinder of iron was an amazing milky quartz crystal about this big, which I still have. And so I went, and I'd go next door and be in his shop. But his daughter moved him to Wisconsin to live with her, leaving only the Vettels across the street, the only other white family on our block.
Were they working class? Whites?
I think he was, I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm going to say he was,
So those were the only two white families?
yes,
that lived
at
with
the
you?
time.
Okay.
On our block. I didn't even know
Okay.
other blocks. Next door was the Purnells, and then the Freemans. Mr. Freeman always had a farm, always had a truck garden in the back. And then the Johnsons next door, next at them, and Mr. Johnson was also always amazing to me because his name was Ivory, and he had beautiful salt and pepper hair, but his skin tone was dark teak. He was a beautiful guy. And his wife was very light-skinned with a very pronounced North Carolina accent. And then Mrs. Mims, the Geechee woman, across the street from them.
So what was the childhood like?
It was difficult because I had to, after that 1 year or two of being driven, then I had to
Come back.
then I had to take the bus down Fifth Street, and then across Columbia Road, and then up 34th Street, or take the bus to Kennedy Street, take the Kennedy Street bus all across Military Road, up to Connecticut Avenue, and then take the bus down to Connecticut Avenue, and then walk up Porter Street past the Chinese consulate and all this other stuff to get to school.
How long did you, that must have taken a long time.
Yeah. And that's part of why I have to wear glasses. I'm sitting there trying to read paperbacks on a bumpy bus. And I went with some of those same kids on the bus sometimes, not all the time.
What same kids?
The same kids that were in the cab. Stephanie
The
Sellers.
5 of you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this was, again, an integrated school.
Um,
What was this school?
this was the public school that the powerful in DC that wanted to say they sent their kids to public school sent their kids to.
Who are the powerful people in DC?
Well, as I said, the curator at the Corcoran, senators, congressmen, ambassadors. This was the people that my fellow students were.
But help me understand, why
Yeah.
did you have to change from the Cleveland Heights School to this other school?
I mean, I went to Whittier,
Yeah.
first and kindergarten, first grade, with my sister walking me to school every day, teaching me Spanish, even though I didn't want to, because she was taking Spanish. And so she's practicing teaching me Spanish every day to school. I'm like. Then second grade.
Did you learn it?
Poquito solo.
Oui, oui.
And it came in useful, of course.
Sure.
And then second, at that same year, when I was in second grade, and I guess she was in sixth grade, yeah. She went to seventh grade. She went to Jefferson. Chico went to Page School, and I went to Eaton. So we all left the neighborhood and went to these different amazing schools. But because it took so long to get home, it was hard for me I couldn't come home from school and play with my neighbors. And Ronnie and Hackey around the corner, I didn't have much connection with these people. The example I give, and I explain this to the kids that I work with in Arizona, because Arizona is in the bottom 2 or 3 in education spending. And I explain this to them. I say, when I went back to my neighborhood school, I got straight A's all the way through. Because the stuff they were teaching in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade in my neighborhood school, I learned in the 3rd and 4th grade on the other side of town. So I just sat there and read paperbacks and got straight A's. Because
The education was much better
Yes.
than the other schools.
yes. And so I didn't have much to say to converse with the people in my neighborhood during those elementary school years. And then when I get to junior high school, it was pretty much the same thing, or maybe even worse, because I had kids coming from further away from Tacoma Park, deeper into DC, in the second alphabet, you know, in Webster and that part, and because I was in the third alphabet, Rittenhouse. You understand what I'm talking about? DC started out with A through Z, coming from the North Capitol, and okay, that's how it was broken down. You go A to Z, then you go one syllable A to Z, then two syllable A to Z, then three syllable A to Z, and then flowers. And so I was in the three syllable, closer to Silver Spring, Tacoma Park, and a lot of the people that were coming from south of me were coming from rougher neighborhoods, which I had to learn to deal with, because I didn't have to deal with that because of where I was going to school there, and then coming back home and having to do homework, and by the time I got home, had to do my homework, it's dinner time, and that's it. So I did not get to hang with the Freeman boys or Ronnie and Hackey or Carl across the street, because I had work to do.
Did you ever demonstrate about that, or were you?
That was reality.
That was reality. There was no question.
No, I mean, I tried to spend time in Cleveland Park with those people. And in reflection at this very moment, the people that I connected most with were one person whose mother was from England, so a bit estranged. Another one whose parents were psychiatrists, Jewish, another estranged. And then the other one whose father was an Episcopal bishop and whose mother got in Life magazine working with ghetto kids. And those were the strongest friendships that I had at that school.
But your family was really quite an extraordinary family by any standard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And were you aware of that as a child?
I was told it enough.
Okay.
But I was
Talk about that.
I was told that because this is who we are. This is what has been done already, and this is where you're going, based on that. You know, it was not to shine a star,
No.
but it was
It
to
was a responsibility.
bestow a mantle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a responsibility.
So that's pretty heavy.
Yes, and on numerous occasions I've been to readers and psychic reader, and this woman said, little blonde, she says, "Look at you," and I said, I have all these things that I have to do," and she said, "I'm looking, and I can see all this multitude of ancestors who are with you. And they are so excited to be working with you. But the expectations that you have, they are not holding on you. They are just here to be working with you."
Tell us about your family. Grandparents.
Wow. My father's parents, my gut memory of them is nurturance. My father's mother died when I was very young, so I only have really one real memory of her. But of course I have the feeling. And the one memory is when we have driven up from DC and pull into Sharswood Street and pull up to the curb, and the door flies open and she runs to the car and just beaming all this love into my face. And I'm like, you know, like that. And her husband, my grandfather, my main memory of him, excuse me, is of, I come in, you bring you in, go into the summer kitchen, sit in the chair, wrap the thing around, he cuts my hair. Because he was a barber,
What's the
among other
summer?
things. The summer kitchen,
Yeah.
is like a part pantry,
Okay.
storage area. You know,
Interesting.
and it's a little cooler, a little lower and cooler and darker.
Yeah.
So,
So please name your grandfather and grandmother.
so my grandmother, Beatrice Butler Wilson, and my grandfather, Ernest James Wilson. And my dad's Ernest James Wilson Jr., and my brother's Ernest James Wilson III. And then my nephew is Malik Ernest Wilson. And these grandparents, my father told me the story of going to visit his grandmother down in South Carolina. And I think he was the only one, he was the oldest of four. And those grandparents left South Carolina in 1919 as part of the exodus during the Red Summer.
The Red Summer,
The Red Summer of 1919. Which is that these African American men were coming back from World War I in uniform with the Croix de Guerre and medals and experiences. And so they're not going to step off the sidewalk for any hayseed that decides to call him nigger and spit on him. So there were riots all over the United States. 19.
Okay.
The Red Summer of
After
1919.
World War I.
After World War I, these brothers came back and said, sugar, I'm not going to take it. I don't have to take it. And of course, the United States tried to make sure that they did take it. And that's the lynchings and all that stuff were horrible. But there were amazing, amazing stories of these black soldiers. Oh, you're going to mess with us? They go home and get their guns and they come out in formation to take on these mobs. And my grandfather, just in his uniform, World War I uniform, says, I'm not going to take this mess. So the story I got from my dad is that he goes to Columbia, South Carolina, and he gets Beatrice, and he marries her. 1919, and he says, we got to get out of here. So they go to the train station, and he asks her, let me go get the ticket. So he has her sit down. This is the way I heard it, and not necessarily the way it happened. He said, and he goes to the ticket agent and reaches in his pocket and said, boom, how far north will that money get me? And the guy said, okay. So they wound up in Greenwich, Connecticut, which, if you don't know, this is this huge, not huge, very small, very rich. It is I think it's the richest, one of the most rich towns in the United States, Greenwich, Connecticut. You know, all the people from outside of DC with money. That's where they wind up, 1919. So Pop-Pop says, I'm gonna go see about our accommodations. I'll be right back. So he leaves her in the station in Greenwich, Connecticut, and goes out and says, excuse me, where's the colored part of town? And they say, there is no colored part of town in Greenwich, Connecticut. And then, so he says, okay, where's the Masonic Lodge? He says, oh, I can tell you that. And so the story I got is he goes to the lodge and gets a job as a cook with lodging upstairs, goes and gets his wife from the train station, and they move in. And then my dad is born in next year, and then they move to Baltimore, where their second child dies, and then they move to Philadelphia, where the rest of my uncles and aunts are born. That's ballsy, right?
Sure.
So I got to get out of here.
Yeah. Especially South Carolina, which I think even to this day is one of the most difficult states.
Well, I'll help people understand it by saying Carolina Colony, South Carolina, was founded by plantation people from Barbados. And Barbados imported, what's it? I just looked it up because I was working on a book and I've got a song that I had to do some reference on. They imported, what's it, 6,000, more than 6,000 Africans a year, every year to Barbados. And the life expectancy, I think, was 5 years for any person in Barbados that was imported to work there. So they were churning through people. And this is the system and the people that came to South Carolina.
Because I read about how the bringing of the slaves there was very horrific. Was the whole...
Yeah. I had a friend, I still have a friend, but she moved. But what I would do in her classroom, I'd come to her classroom every year. And as part of my presentation, I would do a song from Carolina, from the Sea Islands, and give the story of that song. And in order to do that, I would have all the students get out of their chairs, lay down underneath the tables, and then I would describe the Middle Passage to them. Because where you are right now, you would be there 40, for 40 hours at a stretch, maybe more. Then they'd unchain you, bring you up, exercise you, wash, rinse you off, and put you back down in there for a month. And then I would continue and tell the story of a group of people being captured and brought over to Carolina and finding out what was going to happen to them.
And there was an island, right?
Many islands. This was on Saint Simon's Island. This is the song "Oh Freedom." You know the song "Oh Freedom"? Mm-hmm. And this song was written because these people said, water brought us here, water is going to take us back. Mm-hmm. So these 18 Igbo people on Dunbar's Creek on St. Simon's Island, they made this pact. Igbo people join hands, just walk right back into the water. Said, oh, you mean if we pray, we're beaten? If we speak Igbo, we're beaten? We get 5 pounds of meal a month? We get 1 set of clothes a year? Our marriages are not sanctified? Our children are taken from us? Oh, boy, I'll be a slave. I'll go home beneath the waves. Yeah. And so I tell that story with these students under the table to just get an inkling.
So your grandfather came from that?
Yeah.
Especially going and serving in the military?
His grandfather,
who is?
The old judge.
Okay. Name?
Judge Wilson.
Okay.
His father was, as I learned it as Edward, but I have a cousin who's saying it was a different name. But his father was the plantation owner and was a judge in Saluda, South Carolina. And so you wanted light eyes, there you go. And it goes back on my mother's side about the same distance, a little bit farther back. So this came on both sides, and that's where you get this. There's a story that my grandfather's father went to visit his mother in the big house.
On the plantation?
On the plantation in Saluda. And the judge was getting ready to come in. And of course, the pickaninnies aren't supposed to be in the big house. So they had a big cooking pot, lifted up, stuck him underneath, boom, and hit him in the upturned pot, because his daddy was coming. Hide him from his father, because he's not supposed to be there.
That was your grandfather?
That was my great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather?
Yeah.
In South Carolina?
In South Carolina. And his son, after World War I, said, this is crazy.
Went up to Connecticut.
went up to Connecticut,
And then worked down to Baltimore.
and then lost Edward, and then they moved to Philadelphia. And that's when the mass exodus was happening. So my father's parents was the station, just like my wife's grandparents' house was the station for other people. It was the first stop for a lot of family members coming up, stay with them, and immigrants, so always pile in the same.
So there was a network
Yes, yeah.
from the south to the north to make sure that there was a support system.
That's right. And all my father's mother's brothers and sisters, a lot of them came up, and had that support.
Were there
It's like a-
abolitionists involved, white? Or was it predominantly the blacks?
I don't know anything about that on my father's side. On my mother's side, there's an irony. No, not abolitionists, no.
Okay.
But there's an irony that amongst my grandfather's collected papers was a letter from Woodrow Wilson trying to get some help for him as a young student. And so, as the horrible racist that Woodrow Wilson was, he still did a couple of good things. And I went to Woodrow Wilson High School in D.C., which has since been changed. The name has been changed because
What is
of.
it now?
I believe it was named for two
recently,
people,
because
just
of
really
this.
recently in the
Yes, I
past
don't
couple of
remember
years.
what it's
I think for either the first black teacher there or something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, interesting.
yeah.
So then when did your family end up in DC?
Ah,
After Pennsylvania, after Philadelphia?
yeah. My father's family stayed in Philly.
Okay.
My mother's family, my great-grandfather was in Cleveland. He was asked to go to West Point. Actually, the first person appointed, the first black to go to West Point. So he went to D.C. to meet people, to talk about going to West Point. While he was there, he met General O.O. Howard, who was just starting Howard University. He was impressed with my great-grandfather, and so wrote him a letter saying, why don't you come to Howard and be the first graduate at Howard? And then, this is 1867, so you graduate in 1868, and then you get a job teaching in the normal school. So that's what he did.
Okay, I see.
Boom. And so he was there for many years until my grandfather was born in D.C. And my great-grandfather had to leave because of a horrible scandal, because they saw him in a bar, but I think it was political stuff, and they used that as an excuse. And so my grandfather grew up in Bordentown, because that's where my great-grandfather went to be the headmaster at the colored school in Bordentown, New Jersey. So then my grandfather graduated Harvard in 1910, and then taught at Howard, and wrote the book with Elaine Locke, and founded the Howard Players and all that stuff. And so that's where, and so he was DC. So then he had to leave too, and became principal of the high school in Atlantic City. And that's where my mother and maybe Aunt Yvonne was born in DC, but I think the rest of them were born in Atlantic City. My father was a medic in the Pacific in World War II. And he was sending his money home so that when he came back, he could go to med school, become a doctor. He comes back from World War II and finds out that his mother had been spending all that money on the other kids So he thought he had money for med school. He's trapped. So he goes to Howard University, and works there and becomes dean. He's running Cook Hall, men's dorm, becomes dean, does some dangerous stuff to get ahead, and eventually becomes foreign student advisor, then dean and director of international student services at Howard University. So we had people from all over the world coming through our house. So he moves to DC. While he is going to Howard, he goes up to Atlantic City to work during the summer at hotels and stuff like that. America's Playground, Atlantic City. And there he meets my mother's middle older brother, because there's Uncle Monty, Uncle Hugh, and Uncle Gene. So Uncle Hugh and my daddy become ABC. You know what ABC? Ace Boone Coons, best friends. So my daddy and his best friend's little sister hook up and they get married. So Mignon, my mother, marries Ernie and they move to DC, where my brother and sister and I are born. And then, right after we leave Gresham Place and move to the house on Rittenhouse, my grandparents sell their house in Atlantic City and move right a block over from us.
So there are three of you. You're the youngest?
I'm the youngest, boy, girl, boy.
Okay. Are there other things about your childhood and upbringing in Washington, D.C. that you'd like to share?
One thing, yes. I'm sad now when I go back to DC because I was so comfortable in DC when it was human-sized. All the buildings downtown were no more than 4 or 5 stories high, except for a couple of department stores, because those buildings were built when humans had to haul the bricks up by hand. And so it was such a comfortable city at that scale. But now there's so many huge buildings that that quaintness has been lost. I used to love going downtown when there was a downtown for shopping.
What was considered downtown?
F Street.
Okay.
F Street, like 7th, heck, 9th and 7th and G and all that part of downtown. And remember going to Waxy Maxie's. That was cool. I was like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Go downtown myself and go to the record store.
Was that Waxy Maxie's?
Waxy Maxie's, yes. And in front of Waxy Maxie's would be the people's Panther paper, selling the Black Panther newspaper, or Muhammad Speaks. Or you get that more in New York. But in DC, Panther paper. So there's this awareness of these things going on. Of course, I'm so lucky that I have this memory of there still being street musicians also in DC. And that's a memory I loved enough that I wanted to share that back. So when I was living at First and R and working at the Smithsonian, I'd take the bus down, straight down North Capitol, and I'd take the bus back up, was it 7th Street bus, and bring my banjo with me. So, and when I'd walk from 7th down Rhode Island and over to First and R, I'd be playing the banjo, just walking down the streets of DC in 1992, 1991. You know, and then go down the street, "You're getting better, boy." And so that's, DC was still anybody would talk to you like that. I was able to do that, and people felt comfortable to even.
Very personal.
Very personal and personable, yeah. But yeah.
And when did that change?
While I was gone.
You left when?
I graduated high school in 75. And my first year of high school, I guess that's 72, they had to dance. And at the dance, I think it was 3 guys, the homecoming dance, and at Woodrow Wilson High School, 3 guys robbed the gate, the door, the tickets at the Horseshoe coming in on the Wisconsin Avenue side of Wilson, and shot and killed the assistant principal, Alfonso E. Brown. And I was there with my cousin, who's the son of the math teacher at Rabot, my mom's brother's second wife's youngest son. And we were there when the shooting happened, and the stampede came pouring toward us, and we had to get people out that way. But it was an interesting place then, because it was about a third or half white still, Wilson was. But the student council at that point was all black. And most of the black kids at Wilson were Gold Coast kids and stuff, like Upper 16th Street. So it was the amalgamation class, however you want to label those, that amount, the people with that amount of money and that kind of awareness. That was what most of the black people at Wilson were at the time, 72 to 75 when I was there. Then I decided I'd go to Oberlin College. And going to Oberlin College was funny. It was, in retrospect, it was funny. But anyway, after I realized it was not the place to be, so I went to NYU. I transferred to NYU. But I was back and forth, watching DC change. And of course, in '68, when we used to go up to 14th Street and shop. Yeah, I do. My voice does boom, doesn't it? We used to we'd go up to 14th Street, right near Park Road and then Columbia, which was, as I remember, it was a magical shopping area. Because they'd still have the things you could put in a nickel and ride the horses and all, and I'm thinking of the shoe store. It's magical. When you go to the shoe store and take your shoe off and they measure your feet out and all kind of fun things. And orderly and dressed up to go shopping and things like that. And of course, all that got destroyed in the riots in April 1968. And
after the shooting.
After murder of King, yeah. And the powers that be decided to let that stay that way. And it's rotted until the 90s. So they let that sit almost 30 years.
What do you mean?
They
didn't build that?
They didn't rebuild it.
They just left it?
They just left it.
After the riots?
After the riots. And that was the main shopping area for black people. And now I'm thinking, what did we do? I remember we went on Georgia Avenue, we went to Ida's. There was a little department store called GEM, Government Employees Mart, that we would go to, or we'd have to go downtown. So that's, I'm thinking now, wow, how all our money that had been centralized now had to be dispersed and go to the new suburbs or dinkier places, or to the department stores way downtown, way out of comfort and convenience for us. And it was, I guess in the late 90s, I was back in town, and my friend from high school, he was back living in DC. And he took me on a whirlwind tour of 14th Street, because by then the Metro had been built up, and it was Yuppieville by then. And I was not shocked, and because I'm a historian, I wasn't saddened, but because I've seen in history that has happened before. DC has gone like this, black, white, black, white. But it was impressive to, because when I left DC, it was still Chocolate City. You know about Chocolate City.
But you don't, but tell us.
Okay.
about Chocolate City.
Chocolate City, Parliament Funkadelic, George Clinton and Bootsy and them used to come to DC a lot. And myself and our cadre of friends always be backstage with them. DC was so powerful for that band that when Parliament's second album, because Parliament Funkadelic put out a bunch, Parliament, which is the singing group, and Funkadelic, which is the band. Mm-hmm. So Parliament's first album, Up for the Downstroke, second album was entitled Chocolate City, because DC had such a large African-American population that we called it Chocolate City. And when you bought the Chocolate City album, you got the Chocolate City logo on the front, and on the back of the t-shirt, it said, "God bless Chocolate City and its vanilla suburbs." Because that's what PG County and Montgomery County were. But since then, since the 70s, African Americans chasing affluence moved out into the developments in Prince George's County, leaving this hole that now the Euro-Americans have moved back in. As the amenities improved, as the metro was built, and all those things, then it became the switch. And I moved back to DC. Like I went to Oberlin College, realized that wasn't a place to be. Transferred to NYU.
And studied what?
Okay, now that's you had to ask that question. Now there's a big story for that. When I was young, as I said, I get up on Saturday morning, say I'm 9, 10, 11, 12, get up on Saturday morning, walk from 214 Rittenhouse, 3rd Street, up to 5th Street, catch the J5 bus, take it all the way downtown to Federal Triangle, get off Federal Triangle, walk through the cool passageway to, it's at Independence Avenue, and there's the Smithsonian. I'd spend all day in the Smithsonian. I'd be there so much, the Bob Brown marionettes, people, they knew me by name because I'd be there so much. And of course, there's a Triceratops down there, a fiberglass, life-size fiberglass Triceratops down there. And back then, you could climb up it and slide down the tail. That was so much, of course, it's roped off now, you can't do that. So, I wanted to be a paleontologist. My Aunt Thelma, my father's only sister, every time she saw me, she said, "Gregory, you know, every time I see him, he was always into rocks." And I'm still into rocks, because remember I told you about Mr. Brodsky and that milky quartz crystal. But when I got to Rabault Junior High School, I got involved in photography. I got on the stage crew because I was a trustworthy soul, and got in the Oya African Dancers and Drummers. And so I'm dancing and drumming and singing and storytelling and all this. So I really became the creative artist at that point. But then I get to coming on high school, coming on senior year, I said, well, I need to straighten up. I need to go back and be a scientist again. So I chose Oberlin College thinking I could get a degree and then take classes in the conservatory to placate my creative soul. And that didn't work. That didn't work. Because I didn't have a strong enough foundation in science, in hard science, to really go that way. And that was never my path anyway. I come to realize that my interest in rocks and paleontology and all that stuff, and then subsequently becoming an archivist, historian, was my own search for true understanding of the spiritual continuity of life. And in the materialist Western world, you do that through fossils and material things. But really what I was looking for was understanding and wisdom, which I've been able to acquire, or at least glean, through working through my studies of culture and folklore. But I had to be a scientist. So I went to Oberlin and tried to do that and be in the and take classes in the conservatory and be in the jazz ensemble and study music of India and play in the gamelan and do all that stuff. And I went and take private percussion lessons in the conservatory. So I go to the head of the percussion department, and he informs me that Babatunde Olatunji, the father really of world music in the States, had been at Oberlin the year before. So he suggested that I go and study with him, because that Olatunji can really play that cowbell. And that's how he described it. And I was like, you asshole. He could really play that cowbell. It was demeaning for the person who had like the first world music record in 1959, Drums of Passion. And I said, yeah, so I did. And I went to Olatunji's and worked with him for a month. It was, so I'm.
Where was this?
Where, when?
Where?
This was in he had his 125th between 5th and Madison was where Olatunji's Center of African Culture in Harlem, New York. So my Uncle Hugh, my daddy's best friend, Uncle Hugh lived at 141st and Convent Avenue in an apartment that has been owned by his wife's family for 4 or 5 generations now. And so I spent the month of January 1976 walking from 141st and Kent Convent, from 141st down to 125th Street, and then over from Convent Avenue, all the way over to Olatunji's, with 2 conga drums on me, with Army surplus pea coat, Army green coat with the lining, like every day for a month. But it's me, Olatunji, a guy from Senegal whose name I don't recall, and an African-American dude, Kahende Stewart, and we were doing performances in school shows for Olatunji's, as part of Olatunji's. So I got to meet him. I got to meet the Derby sisters. I got to hang with Olatunji. So that when I wrote my book, The Drummer's Path, Olatunji wrote the foreword for that book. And when in 2000, and that book came out 30 years ago, in 92. And so in 2000, when they're having a benefit concert, farewell concert for Olatunji in upstate New York, and I go because I knew there had to be somebody there that knew of him before the drum circles existed for Euro-Americans, that understood his African-American importance. So that I went there to represent that.
Do you remember?
Middletown or something like that. I have it in my files. And so that I went up and did that, and everybody was trying to get their picture taken with Olatunji. Mickey Hart from the Grateful Dead, and all these other bigwig people were there, and I was like, but then I hear, Sule's here! Because Baba's, you can barely see at this point. Sule, where are you? Come here! And he'd heard, and so he had me come and sit. Yeah.
Drum circles.
Yes.
What is that?
So this guy, they did the storytelling thing, right? And then they interview the audience. And the audience comes up with details of the story that he never said, but that he had in his vision as he was telling the story. So that is the real power of storytelling, is that you are, well, it's the same thing as being a teacher. It's the same thing as being anybody that goes out. I'm always really tired the first month or so. I come home and just die, when school, first semester starts, because you have to open up your energy field and put everybody inside that energy field until they get used to being inside your energy field. And the knuckleheads are doing like this. They're trying to push, and you have to hold it until they get comfortable being inside your field. And that is how, as a teacher, you can have your back turned and say, ah! It's like you're the spider and the fly gets caught, and you feel the ripple and the spider comes out. Or I liken it also to capoeira. Capoeira, Brazilian martial art, which takes place in a roda, in the round. And one of the things I love about capoeira, aside from the fact that it's an African-based art and disguised as dancing, is that when you're doing it, the master, you just create that field in the roda, so you know where the person is going to go. That's when I was at Eaton Elementary School, I learned this. Because I just got a ding in relation to that. And I would watch the kicker. This is playing kickball. You got big bouncy ball and they roll the ball. And I watched the kicker, and I would watch their core. And I could tell from watching their core where they were going to kick the ball. I could see, and that's the same thing I do when I'm doing my healing stuff, being able to see where that energy is. And in capoeira, the person fills up the roda with their energy field, so they know where the person's going to go. So when the person is about to go into a handstand, you just put your foot out, and they run into it. You don't have to kick them; you just let them run into it. So, you want to go back to drum circles?
Yep.
But the other thing about my neighborhood, yes, it was Mr. Brodsky next door. Yes, it was the Vettels across the street.
The White family.
Yes.
Okay.
But at the corner was a appliance shop, sold washing machines and stuff like that. And it was amazing. I felt so rich in my neighborhood because we had Herman's, the sandwich shop. You had the other one around the corner that I never went in. And then you had Manor Park Drug and Grocery, which was run by the Cohens, Jewish family. And they had the soda fountain where you get hamburgers and stuff, and they had the candy, and they had sundries. It was like a real old-fashioned, grocery store right there in our neighborhood, and I felt so rich in our neighborhood because this is at Rittenhouse, right? So at Kennedy Street, 3rd and Kennedy, we had the Kennedy Theater. Then, that's, however many blocks away that is. Then, and that's going south. Then going north, going straight up to Georgia Avenue, because from 3rd to 10th Street, you had the Sheridan Theater. Then, here, you had, at 4th and Butternut, you had the Tacoma Theater. So I had 3 movie theaters in my neighborhoods. I felt so rich. And I only remember going to the Tacoma Theater once with my mom and my grandma to see World of the Brothers Grimm. The Kennedy was where you'd go see all the double features, like you see Shaft, and I was looking for this stupid movie just the other day, Blood Feast and Macabro. Slasher, cheap, not even a B movie, a D movie. Anyway, but it's a lot of fun. But the Cohens were the neighborhood where you could go there and they, get a hamburger, a cheeseburger, and sodas and all that stuff. And 2 doors down from that was Smitty's. And he'd say, hey, Lil Wilson, come on in. And this is where I'd get my hair cut, at Smitty's.
This is a barbershop.
The barbershop, black-owned barbershop.
Black-owned barbershop, that's a major institution.
Yes. And one thing that was so cool is he would let me borrow the comic books and take them home and bring them back. And I got my love of comic books from my cousin Hank, who's my Aunt Thelma, the one that's this Greg and his rocks, her son, living in Philadelphia. He was an illustrator, so he studied comic books. And he was an illustrator. He went on to become a graphic artist. He did Stevie Wonder's In Square Circle. He did that album. But the way I see it, he was this great graphic artist and stuff because his mother was. But his mother was told, you're not going to get anywhere with this. So you just better go ahead and do something else. And so she became a social worker. And so that creative seed went into her son, and he did that. So that's what I love comic books. And now Smitty's, okay, so just a few years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I was back in DC, staying at my grandparents' house, where my cousin lives now. And I walked down the street, and Smitty said, hey, little Wilson. Amazing. And the last time I was there, I stopped by. He sold it, so now it's a young black man running the place. And he knew Smitty because he bought it from him. He said, come on and get it. Yeah, no, I don't have time, but so it's still going on. The amazing thing, the Cohens sold that place and moved out, and it went through some tribulations, but right now, that store is being run by the DC branch of the Aseret Society. And the Aseret Society is the Pan-African religious organization that I was a part of for many, many years in New York. In the founding chapter was up there. And this brings to mind the thing that I've been saying. I gotta copyright this and put it on a t-shirt. I'm trying to get the exact phrasing right, but as we sit and talk and we understand this person knows this person, knows this person, knows this person who is cousin to this, and it makes all these things happen, is people say, wow, small world. Not small world, big family. It's a big family that we are energetically, ancestrally connected with, that we are having these ancillary, corollary lessons to learn from each other and missions to bring forth together as part of this collective of, this generational, on earth at this moment collective, that we entwine our goals and energies to help move us all forward.
So you're going to tell me about the
Drum circles. Yes, I didn't forget. Okay, just a second. Trying to be sexy, off the shoulder.
Make sure you get that in.
I have all of it. Not me, it was the strap from the cord. Drum circles. Takes us back to my understanding. I was in so many ways blessed. So many ways blessed. One of the ways blessed was, like as I said, having the experience of street musicians in DC. And having music be part of the ambiance of my world, functional part of my world. And then coming up at a time where I could hear that stuff on the radio. with a 360-degree black experience, the WHUR. But then I'm also listening to WOL, Soul Radio. So this stuff, you know, is coming through the airwaves. And during the same time, I would, like, was it 1970, 71 that Shaft, the movie Shaft came out? And I'd hear Shaft on WOL. And Isaac Hayes says, man, this guy Shaft is a bad mother, shut your mouth. I'm talking about Shaft, and we can dig it, right? I'd hear that on WOL. Then I'd switch the dial and go to WPGC, Good Guys Radio, which has now gone to urban format. But at the time, it was still the white suburbs in Prince George's County. And they'd say, this guy Shaft is a bad, shut your mouth. And they cut the mother out for the white stations. And for the black stations, they keep mother in. And I was driving in the car, and about 6 months ago when Shaft came on the oldie station, I said, which version is it going to be? And it was the white version. Bad mother, shut your mouth. They cut mother out of it. What does this have to do with drum circles? The point is that we're being fed different versions of stuff. When I was in 1968, 68, 69, I started getting in Oya African dancers and drummers, and I'm drumming, and I'm dancing. And I'm doing ceremony, public ceremony. We're doing namings and, you know, and all kinds of things
For the African American.
for the American community, yes. And prior to that, and this is I wrote this in my book, The Drummer's Path, 30 years ago, but it only hit me about 2 years ago that when I was like 5 years old, I had oatmeal boxes that I used for my hand drums. I had a set, which I kept in the kitchen. Kitchen had a built-in cupboard with the drawers, you know, with the cabinet underneath. And I kept my little hand drums at my level for a little kid down there. And like I said, it's just recently realized that's not normal, because in DC, yes, I might have gone to International Night at Howard University and seen, I know I did, and seen people from Thailand and Trinidad and all these other, in Ghana and Nigeria and all these other places doing their stuff. But this is coming from there, you know? And then add that to Oya African dancers and drummers at Rabot Junior High School, where we're performing for the community. And my first paycheck is with Oya African dancers and drummers. So we're doing, is it Jazzmobile or Dancemobile? So we're touring DC on, you know, those portable stages, doing our stuff. And I keep going and I keep going with this. It's impossible for me to find, I mean, after junior high school into high school, I can't find men to teach me to dance. You know, so I don't dance, you know. But I'm in DC and going to house parties. So I'm dancing. And I have the vision of my parents dancing in the living room. And then I have the vision of my big brother and sister doing what they call now hand dancing, but at the time was called the DC Bop, which, you know, Chicago Steppin' and all these, there are all these different versions of this, which we call floor Lindy, you know. So I soaked all that in. Of course, by the time I was having parties or going to my friends' parties, between my sister, 4.5 years older than me, and me, hand dancing had stopped. That quick. And of course, which brings the point also that we're driving past McMillan Reservoir you know, on the east,
By Howard?
the eastern border of Howard University. And every time we'd pass Lucretia Mott Elementary School, the segregated school there, they'd get pointed out. See those steps right there? That's where Chico pulled Wendy's tooth out. And my brother and sister went to that segregated school. And I'm the first one to not go to a de jure segregated school. Because you might say de facto at Whittier. But and I'm saying that in tandem with how the dancing changed. Because you went from the Four Tops to the Jackson 5. And that changed. But then went back when Prince came in and stuff like that. But
Came back when Prince came.
yeah, because Prince brought, he was a connoisseur of traditional African American arts, performance. So he became a dancer and things like that. Motown, and this all goes back to the thing of drum circles, believe it or not. Motown hired Charlie Atkins, a tap dancer, to be the choreographer. And Smithsonian did a tribute to Charlie Atkins when I was working at the African American Museum Project. And so the legacy of all African American vernacular dance was distilled into Coles and Atkins' routine. Honey Coles goes on to become manager at the Apollo. Charlie Atkins moved to Detroit and teaches Motown how to dance. And what he's giving them is the classy version of all of African American traditional dance. So cool. And I got to meet these guys, both of them. So cool. This drumming I have to do because I can't find a man to dance with, so I have to just hold on and dig where I could. Everyone that I was meeting, but then I had the boot dancers on shows too, as examples also.
The boot dancers.
Yes, this is. She's good. She's good. Don't let anything go by. Give me 5. Don't leave me hanging. It's cold. Don't leave me hanging. Thank you. All right. On the bill, as with all your African dancers and drummers in junior high school, we're going around doing programming in the community, and many times we share the bill with this group of brothers with their perfectly round afros, in fatigues, but all black fatigues. So this is hearkening back to what's going on. These brothers come back from Vietnam and everything. Just like we had the Red Summer 1919, all the brothers come back from World War I. Now you have all the bloods coming back from Nam. And these are the guys that I would be meeting as a drummer in the park. People with all that stuff. And so the boot dancers would be dressed all in black fatigues, black boots, and come in, and they would do their own version, DC version. This, as go-go is starting to happen, this DC version of the Zulu South African boot dancing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm taking all this in. And so drumming and this whole community thing, all the people that are drawn to drum and dance, they do this as an ancestral connection, a community connection, an overt way to reinstate traditions waylaid by 500 years of terrorism. And that goes along with, how come Jeannie O'Donnell gets a movie and I don't get a movie? And Panther Paper, Muhammad Speaks. No, actually it'd be Panther Paper or Bean Pie. That's really what it would be.
And go-go came in shortly after?
Yes, I'd say I am partly responsible for go-go because I'm playing with the African dance group from '69, and I guess I guess 74, 75, I leave DC in '75 to go to Oberlin. But I'm still drumming and stuff then. We did, Operation Crossroads Africa Trek. You marching, get sponsored marches, you walk a certain amount of money. African Liberation Day. We're there with conga strapped on. This is a 25-mile walk through DC with conga, with all our drums and bells and stuff. And I still have, to this very day, went to Sunny Surplus downtown and got a surplus Army gas mask bag, because you have to, it's this thing that you have right there, you pull the gas mask on, that I carried fried chicken in. We were walking for African Liberation Day drumming, so I'd have cold chicken to eat. And I still have that, I carry my conch trumpet in that. So African Liberation Day. So we're in Oya African Dancers and Drummers, right? We have a show to do in Annapolis, Maryland. This is all, again, this is context for drum circles. We drive to Annapolis to do a show at an African festival. And just think of this, must have scared the crap out of these people. We're in this pickup truck, all these colored kids from DC, this is 71 or 72 or 73, drumming and dancing, doing power to the people. Black, driving down to the dock in Annapolis. Black, black power to the African people who will survive in America. Very few niggas and no crackers at all. Through the streets and down there, right? And we're down there. This is high school. This has to be 73 or 73, I think, because my friends from high school are there now with me. And we've set up, the mics are hot. My cousin Alan is there to help. He's sitting in there, but so myself and my buddies, we're just on stage doing a microphone, a hot mic with the kids. We're doing quotes from Funkadelic and making stupid sounds and doing stuff like that, And I look up and I see my cousin Alan, and then somebody says to me, "This is not what you're here for. This is not what you represent." I was like, okay. So I had no obligations to the ancestors, like I felt this obligation, but I certainly had been entreated to do things a certain way. And of course, I'm still using that Funkadelic stuff today because that is a deep, deep part of African American spirituality, which is what Funkadelic was able to do. Just as Charlie Atkins was able to do. He brought all this folklore into a succinct form. And that's the same thing that Parliament Funkadelic did. They brought all this folklore into this succinct form that was able to cross over.
So Sule, the drum circles then were started in DC, would you say?
Okay, no.
Yeah.
I would go, my brother told me that he would go to P Street Beach. He's 9.5 years older than me, and they would have jams, folk music and percussion and stuff, jams down there. I also know I was just at the tail end of people drumming in DuPont Circle. When we did that Africa Trek, the African Liberation Day, it wound up at Malcolm X Park, Meridian Hill Park, where there has been an ongoing drumming community for decades. I'm making the distinction of not a drum circle. Because, and this is research, this is based on Eric Cherry's research, who wrote the preface for Olatunji's autobiography, where he had to contextualize Olatunji. So he called me and a bunch of other people about this. And hand drumming crossed over to white people. Drum circles is white people, or so-called white people, because there's no such thing as white people. There's no such thing as black people too, because if you have to do that, you got to really understand it's really neither. But for political understanding, it's more expedient for white people to understand there's no such thing as white people than for black people to not understand, because they have the things they have to work out. And they need to not understand that there's no such thing as white people first, and then a lot of stuff, tension can ease off once that happens. So, yes, and there are drum jams. There are community gatherings that I would do when I got to New York City. I'd go to Central Park every Sunday and jam and learn. But a drum circle where people are given instruments and you sit around and somebody orchestrate, that is a Euro-American thing. And it cracks me up so much because, as I've heard them say, we make it in a circle so that there's no one's in charge and everyone is equal. And that makes sense for them. And the purpose of a drum circle for them is not the purpose of drumming for me. Drumming for me is ancestral connection. So I need to learn something in order to invoke something. If I'm going to speak a language, I need to know what the language sounds like. Drum circles, that's not the purpose of a drum circle. The drum circle is a metaphor / excuse for people to let down their guard enough to feel each other and have a sense of community.
Thank you.
My people have that already. You just walk there and say, "What's up?" And so a drum circle is orchestrated. It's so funny. They create this thing so that they're all free, right? But then they fall back on their own traditions. Have you been to drum circle and you see the person in the middle telling people what to do? That's a freaking conductor. You're still white people no matter what is in front of you. And unfortunately, I say drum circles are inherently racist for a couple of reasons. Number one, because they refuse to humble themselves to actually learn something. They want to do this thing, and then you're orchestrated. So you're still being you. You're having an experience, but getting hit upside the head is an experience. If you want an experience, the way I have used the experiences and teachings I've had, what I did with the group last night was to help people understand that through rhythm and these techniques, these technologies that have been passed down for thousands of years, which use innate faculties of our humanity to tap into, you can change people's state of soul, alter the consciousness, specifically and consciously. I had an experience. You burped, you had an experience. And so this is where Euro-Americans are with it. They just want to have an experience. You have to know there's some place to go with it. And if you don't have a context for it, you don't even know that there's some place to go with it. So if you don't mind, I'll wax a moment more on that. Drum circles are inherently racist because, okay, we bought this version of an African piece of material culture. And I have it in front of me, so I bought it so I'm entitled. So I have a drum, so I'm entitled. Like the workshop I did last night, nobody drummed. We sang, we stomped, we clapped, we swayed and moved and did rhythm like this. People were like, oh, because it needs to be in you before it can come out of you. Which brings us to the next racist premise of drum circles. Everybody has been forced to admit that mankind came from Africa, right? Okay, you admit it now? All right. But underlying that is the 19th century assumption, yeah, they're them, but we are humanity 2.0. We evolved from them. And we're the next best thing. So, if I take this piece of primitive material culture and I put it in front of me, since I evolved from it, all I have to do is go back into my primal unconsciousness, and then I'll be able to drum like they drum. I can do it, I can, do because, I used to be that. I mean, I've evolved past it, but I used to be that, so it's in me. So anybody can drum. In your own way, you can. But then the other side of that, yes, if you are humanity 2.0, you're 7 years old. I'm 35 years old. Your group of people, your culture is 7 years old. And if you know 7-year-olds, they are very full of themselves and their understanding of what's right and what is and what they can do. And that's where Western culture is. It's at that state. And so that goes into the drum circle thing.
Interesting. Very good. What did you study at NYU?
At NYU, I went to Olatunji's, realized I had to get out of Oberlin College. Went to my friend Jocelyn Hines, who was a cellist, who's from Staten Island, great woman, and said, you're from New York. What university in New York do I look like I go to? This is the hand of God, okay? This is the hand of God, because I was so stupid. Which one? She said, you look like NYU. So I apply to NYU. I get a lot more money than Oberlin gives me, and I go. And since I had been a photographer in junior high school and had been on the photography club at Oberlin, and since I had that thing with Jeannie O'Donnell, I go into the School of the Arts, which is now Tisch School of the Arts. They hadn't given their money yet, so I go into the School of the Arts. And then I decide, am I going to do film? Am I going to do TV? We have a great family friend, James Hinton, amazing filmmaker and photographer. I confer with him, and he says, you probably should do video, because film is really difficult, blah, blah, blah. So I enter NYU for film and TV. And I'm saying to myself, what degree can I get at NYU that I'm not going to hate myself for going to the trouble of getting while I learn what I need to learn in the streets of New York, which is what I did. Like I say, God's hand is always there. Mongo Santa Maria comes to Oberlin College. And when I was in high school, I got Mongo's Afro Roots, his first 2 albums, reissued as a double album set. And I sit in my room with my headphones on and try to learn this music. Big ups to my parents. I can't believe it to this day. My parents are watching TV here. My brother's room is here. My bedroom is right here. And I'm got these headphones on. Boo, bop, chick, boo, boo, chick, bop, got goo, 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 bop, chick. They never once said, cut it out. Never once. So Oberlin, Mongo comes to Oberlin. I come backstage, and I speak to Steve Berrios, his trap drummer. I said, I'm coming to New York. He said, here's my number, here's some other numbers. Call me when you get to town. I do. I sit with him. He said, I tell him what I want to do. He said, I got the people for you. And then, I mean, that first summer, I'm going all over the place. I'm playing in the parks, all these other places, and the same names. Oh, you know, you want these people. You want this, you want this. So, I moved into after I lived with my cousin Susan in her 2.5, her and her boyfriend, and a million roaches in 2.5 rooms in the building that's now the Ford Modeling Agency has that. But in 1977, the floor was like this. It was all cut up. There were so many roaches in this place that I went up the street to the pet store, bought a lizard, and let it go in the apartment, and just let it live off the roaches it ate. And by the time we left, the apartment at the end of the summer was like this big. I couldn't catch it, so I left it in there. So I moved up with Uncle Hugh, and then I take the bus, the train to the bus, to this community center out in Queens. And still steamy, you know, end of summer. And I walk in, and the place is, I mean, actually, I come close to the place, and I can, and then you open the door, it's like, shh, because there's so much energy and steam. And I open the door, and I look in, and there, playing drums, is the guy who I had seen a month and a half before when I went from the drum making workshop on 14th and Park Road with Baile. He sent me up to Philadelphia for the Ile Ife Festival that was being put on by Charles Hall and his group. And I see this guy drumming. He's got 3 congas. I didn't know what was going on. I heard all this ruckus, and I pushed my way through the crowd, and I thought it was 3 people playing. It was 1 person playing 3 drums. And that's the guy who's the first person I see when I walk in the room. It's like, God has sent me to the right place. And that was the right place for me. Because these people, not only did they perform on stage, but they also, you know, just about every weekend played in the Bronx or Brooklyn or Queens in Jersey for ceremonies. So it was real. And also taking that same spiritual knowledge and using it for the benefit of our group. And that's the group I stayed with from 77 till 82, when they got to the point where I saw that they couldn't go any further. They got to the point where they had to get a manager and grants and start touring and stuff. But this was a folkloric ensemble who they were clerks and teachers and contractors. And it's like, I'm spending a fortune in barrettes for my daughters. How can I not work hoping we get grants to continue? So that's when I stepped away and joined that Pan-African religious organization, which I was with in the priesthood training for that for the next many years, whose DC branch took over the store, which used to be run by the Cohens, right around the corner from my house. So it's so amazing how far you go away, and the things come right back to the neighborhood where my first knowledge of, in that very same building, where I used to go to the Cohens and buy comics and get the Lick-O-Maid and get sodas and stuff like that. Now I can go in and get my ginseng tonic and my veggie burger and find out what's going on with the health and spiritual community in DC by going to that place. And so Coolidge High School, 2 blocks from my house, I didn't go to because Coolidge was not. My sister went because my sister was female and darker. So me and my brother, he went to Page School. Wendy went to the fancy junior high school, but she went back to the neighborhood for high school. But then Wendy being Wendy, she finished high school in like 2 years and went to Africa in between a couple of times and poof, got out of Dodge.
I know. I'm going to interview her later.
Yes. I mean, I'm in my bedroom and Chico is playing Peter, Paul, and Mary and Bob Dylan. So I got that. And then Wendy is playing Bembea Jazz or Hugh Masekela.
Interesting.
And so by the time I get to high school, I stack my record player and I have Les Ballets Africains, The Dramatics, Funkadelic, Taj Mahal, you know, and those are the things.
I mean, you and I could spend another day talking just about the influence of the African American music in this country.
Yeah. No, it's not in this country. Well, it is in this country, but
Beyond, of course.
But like when we were in Thailand, we at Phuket, the beach, and we strolling down that crazy avenue, and there's this bar. All these Filipinos are rocking, but these Russians are there, and they want them to sing all these songs, and it's all in the format of United States music. So you got Filipinos playing, singing for Russians in Thailand, you know, but it's all Black American music. And I'll say this to you, this is, and I say it also in my, just released this year, I'm working on the final version of the book, but it's a course which I have called Moving Beyond Mindfulness. In that I point out that there are no Africans in Africa. There are Twi, there are Ga, there are Fanti, there are Ndebele, there's Xhosa, there's Nuer, but there are no Africans. The only Africans is me, because I have East African, Central African, West African, and all this in me. So Africa, the only Africans is us. And because we endured 500 years of terrorism still ongoing, living in a terrorist state, we distilled the most necessary, the most effective of all of Africa's spiritual practices to allow us to thrive as best we may under terrorism. We could not do as the Cubans and go to the shrine, or the people in Trinidad or Brazil and go to the shrine and do your ebo and do this stuff and make things happen in a few months. When you're in the quarters and they kick the door down, or you're in your house and the Klan shows up at your door, or you're driving your car and you hear boop, you can't pour an ebo. You have to go, right then and there. And so what we have, because of what we've been through, is in us and comes out in our arts. That's why, as our Maid of Honor's little brother says in his comedy routine, everybody want to be black. Everybody want to dance black, they want to talk black, they want to dress black, they want to walk. Everybody want to be black until the police show up. But everybody won't be black because being black means You are tied into the culture that developed how to thrive and grow and still have all the love that we have in terrorism. And that is what comes out in R&B and hip hop and soul food. That's why everybody wants our stuff, because it shows you how to thrive.
Do you have any final words for the younger generation of African Americans?
Yes, it's two versions of the same thing. Remember who you are, and who you are is a wonderful legacy. Your grandmother at 20 weeks had your mother's in there as an egg and you in there too. So you have been on earth already for 2.5 generations. And it goes back and back and back and back and back. So you are full of the power of all that survival, all that joy in what we are, because that is part of our legacy to the world. God made me, and God don't make no junk. God don't make mistakes. God made me. Hallelujah. And that's who you are. That is your gift to the world.